Mr. Ahrens, in the tourism field and tourism business, what's the value of cooperation and can be seen as more as competition to cooperate among enterprises?
Well, of course, competition is tougher for a business model which did not align to the needs we have nowadays compared to, let's say, 20 years ago. As I mentioned in my keynote, 20 years ago, the consumer or the tourist, the traveler, was not as well informed as he is today, and there are so huge databases and there's so much information outside the consumer can gather. I just mentioned TripAdvisor.com, particularly in the English-speaking market, but also let's say Holiday Check, or so these recommendation sites. That's a huge database, and so most important for the competition is that the consumer or the tourist has a certain level of trust into the website or into the product you're offering. And so since the consumer is so much better informed than he used to be in the past, cooperation is also increasing of an increasing importance for business models also in the future, because what I mentioned before, you as a company, you have to concentrate on what you are doing really well, and what you are doing really well is in most cases, or I would dare to say, cannot be the whole value chain. So you need partners and you need corporations to give the consumer the product he is looking for, and to do what you can do best, and to let do your partner what your partner can do best. And if you have two or several partners being in a certain area what they are doing best, you have a competitive product, you have a very good product, and you don't have to be afraid of your competitors outside.
Which is your opinion about the maturity of the tourism market and especially eTourism in Europe? You mentioned during your keynote 3 levels of maturity in Europe, and where would you put this region among Austria and Italy, and namely Carinthia and Friuli Venezia Giulia?
Well, if you look at the numbers, and when you have a look on the website of the OECD, the well-developed countries, and if you compare the average throughout the OECD countries, if I remember fairly well, we are in Austria roughly at 95% of broadband penetration per 100 capita, and in Italy it's a little bit less. It's I think 93%. That's a problem, because if the infrastructure is not set up, so you won't have a broadband penetration like, for example, in the Scandinavian countries, or like, for example, in the United Kingdom. So you need to have several stages. First of all, you need the infrastructure. And there is a lot of potential, particularly in Austria and in Italy, to get the infrastructure set up, despite the fact that there is a lot of digital subscriber lines and broadband via cable internet. But there is still a lot to do, particularly when you see the comparison within the OECD countries. And if we get that thing right, and I think there are huge efforts to continually going on, if you get that right and you have with good offers the trust of the consumers, they won't hesitate in the future to give you their credit card numbers or to give you their bank account numbers, if you have a trustworthy and a good business model in operation.
What do you think is the role of governments, local authorities on one side, and of private SMEs on the other in implementing innovation in this field?
I want to give you an example. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with a customer, a Google customer, who is doing some marketing, some paid keyword marketing on our Google AdWords product. And they say they're sitting in an industrial area somewhere in the north of Germany, and they have to bundle different ISDN lines just to get a good broadband connection. So that is not what I want to see in the next years to come. So I see a clear responsibility of the governments, because in the past the task of the government was to get let's say motorways set up, or to build autobahns and streets. But there are more duties in the future, or even nowadays, for the government. So because a very important point for the infrastructural program is broadband penetration, and to enable your population within your country, even in the rural areas, to get broadband access.
How do you like the event of today, meaning the eTourism in a cross-border perspective, like leverage to enhance the cooperation cross-border also?
Well, if you look at me, I'm working in a company, and by the way, it is not the Google headquarters, it's just the EMEA headquarters for Europe, Middle East and Africa. Our headquarters is actually in California, but we are 1,700 people roughly in Dublin, and there are roughly 60 languages spoken in the office I'm working for. So that's a huge melting pot of people and working together, and I think this can be a kind of model, or so. And this is an incubator, so you can sit together with colleagues from different countries, from Italy, from Spain, from Austria, and you can work on certain projects, and that's what we need for projects in the internet out there, for hugely intangible and highly scalable projects which are in place there. Because if you want to have a proper business model, you either concentrate on a niche, so because you have a very specialized product with a high profit margin, or you have a very highly scalable product, like for example a search engine is. So there's a huge reach, and there's a huge user base, but which will only go on in the future. Or this reach and this user base, we can only establish this if we have a good product on offer, and that's a search result. It's not the search query, it's the search result. And as soon as we wouldn't offer a good search result to the user, we would lose our consumers, because every consumer has the choice for the search engine he uses. And so that's why international cooperation and good projects are so important for the company I am working for. And I think that will increasingly be more important also for other companies offering very intangible, very highly scalable products throughout in the world, so in the internet. So if you want to reach a user base, because you know there are a lot of interested people in your product in the United States, you could easily do it with, well, Google's product on offer is AdWords. So you could easily reach people in the United States, in the United Kingdom, wherever you want in the world, even in Dubai or in Israel. So if you have a certain spa here in Carinthia, and you know there are a lot of interested people in making spa holidays in Carinthia, so why don't set up a campaign and target the people interested in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem or somewhere else in the world? And that's the interesting thing about the internet itself. And I think what will also be of increasingly higher importance is the common language we are using, and that's actually the English language.
Thank you.